I request you all to please settle down. Please. Excuse me. I request you all to please settle down. We would start our next session in a couple of minutes, as we have our esteemed guest here sitting in the front rows. The second last session for Vagarth for the day, or rather for the Bhopal Literature Festival, as we are drawing to the close. The session talks about, it's a book, Taxi, the Sushila Devi Book Award winner by Manjula Padmanabhan, in conversation with Sukrita Kumar. I request both the speakers to please come up on the stage and launch the book. Can we have a big round of applause for our guests?
Hello, check. Hello, check.
I also invite co-founding member Brigadier Sanjay Agrawal to join our speakers at the center of the stage for the book launch. Can we have a big round of applause for Brigadier Agrawal as well? We'll have a quick photo op for the book launch, the unveiling of the book Taxi, the Sushila Devi Book Award winner. Madam Maddie Sen returns to India from the United States, hoping to jumpstart her life by offering an exclusive women's only taxi service in grimy, chaotic Delhi. Then a brutal eviction turns her life inside out. A stranger makes a tantalizing offer. A new home with new friends and an excellent salary can all be hers. The catch: she must pretend, and then, now and then, to be a male chauffeur to a powerful older man. Taxi takes the reader on a twisty romp as Maddie struggles with gender, social class, race, and a flash of wild romance. As the poet Amrita Pritam so beautifully expressed, मैं तुम्हें फिर मिलूंगी कहीं किसी रोज शायद तुम्हारे अंतर्मन की परछाइयों में. I will meet you again somewhere, someday, perhaps in the shadows of your inner self. Our session today explores the depths of creativity, the journeys of two remarkable writers, and the stories that have emerged from their unique experiences. It is time. We are honored to have with us Manjula Padmanabhan, a true Renaissance woman of the arts, author, playwright, artist, and cartoonist. Manjula's talents know no bounds. Her work, often exploring complex themes with wit and insight, has garnered international acclaim. Her play Harvest won the prestigious Onassis Award for Theatre, a testament to her dramatic prowess. From illustrating children's books to penning thought-provoking novels, Manjula's creative spirit shines brightly. We celebrate her recent triumph, the Sushila Devi Award for Women's Fiction, awarded for her compelling novel Taxi. Joining Manjula, yes. We can have a big round of applause for Madam Manjula Padmanabhan. Joining her is Sukrita Kumar, a poet whose words resonate with profound emotion and intellectual depth. A resident poet and fellow at the prestigious International Writing Program at the University of Iowa. Sukrita's work transcends Sukrita's work transcends borders and cultures. Her exploration of partition studies, world literature, and translation showcases her commitment to understanding the human experience in all its complexity. From holding the Aruna Asaf Ali Chair at the University of Delhi to receiving the 2023 Tagore Literary Prize for her selected poems, Salt and Pepper, Sukrita's contribution to the literary world are immense. We also celebrate her newest collection of poems, Yellow, recently published by the Sahitya Akademi. As we delve into the creative process and the power of storytelling, we are reminded of the words of Virginia Woolf. One cannot think well, love well, sleep well, if one has not dined well. For writers, dining well means feeding the imagination, nurturing the creative spirit, and allowing stories to blossom. Thank you for being here to celebrate this incredible work. Let us now immerse ourselves in an evening of poetry and conversation that will surely leave us inspired. Let the conversation begin.
Thank you very much for this wonderful introduction. I have a feeling that it's going to be difficult for you to digest the kind of novel that Manjula has come out with. And look at the title, Taxi. And everybody's intrigued, I'm sure. I'm not sure if any one of you, has anyone read the novel? Oh, there's one person. Oh, there are 3-4 people who have. Give them a clap, please. Thank you for that. Because we were wondering, those of you who've not read the novel, we need to introduce the novel to you, but it'll get introduced as we discuss the novel, I guess, instead of giving out the whole story, because if we do that, the problem is that you are not going to buy the book then. And that's important. Everybody needs to buy the book, right? So anyway, yeah. So I do not know why. Yes, I was on the jury, which actually selected this particular book. And I know you have things to say and ask for that. But we will talk about that later. But the point is that, you know, from one point of view, Manjula, I am a poet, primarily. And for me to discuss the novel, I would have to wear my academic hat, wherein I have been teaching fiction all the time. So just stop me when I start teaching, right? Because I think you have taught me a lot through this novel in one sense. And by that I mean that this is a novel with a difference. I do not know whether to call this a novel which is, yes, it's realistic. When you start reading, there are very real situations. There are descriptions, not so much as theatrical elements. And that's what I appreciate, you know. There is so much of theater going on. There's so much of drama. I want to use the word drama going on in the novel, that it just runs on its own. You know, it's so racy. When you're reading it, it just moves. It's faster than you can keep pace with it, you know. So that's one of the high points of the novel. And, well, would I say that there is no poetry in it? Of course there is poetry. You know, before every chapter, she has put what she calls a doggerel, you know. But it's not meaningless. It's something that provokes you into thinking as to why she would have chosen a certain doggerel out there. It's either sometimes prophetic. You know, I started actually matching that. I said, all right, now these lines of poems, which sound like nonsense verse, you know that it's a very, nonsense verse is a very dignified form of poetry. Do you know that? It's a very sensible kind of nonsense, you know. So nonsense verse, or limericks as they call it, all of that is actually accepted in the forms of poetry, right? So she's using that to not just entertain us, because they are entertaining. Would you like to read 2, 3 of them, please? And then we'll talk about it.
I have to, of course, thank everyone for, first for your introduction, and of course, Sukrita for that wonderful lead-in. To be clear, when Sukrita says that there's a poem in front, at the beginning of every chapter, it's because the chapters are organized like that. There's a little rhyme. And I intended that unless you read the end of the book, you read that little poem and you wonder what is this somewhat meaningless little rhyme here? I mean, some of them are rhymes, some are not. So I'm just reading at random. This is on page 36. It says, "Being alert is sweet and pert. Being alarmed might get you harmed." Okay? Now, believe me when I say they are not profound. They are meant to be, at least the way I thought of it, they're like a little appetizer. They may or may not have anything to do with the chapter. And in fact, I wrote all of them at one go, not in connection with the chapters. I wrote
Something was
them
happening unconsciously.
Yes, I set myself certain limits, like I'll make each one maybe 4 lines long, and I will try and rhyme them or not, and I will then choose the poems almost at random to introduce each chapter and leave the reader guessing as to why they are there. The one thing I can tell you is there is a reason they're there, but the reason is not obvious. So whether you, I mean, I can't know whether when people read the book, do they always read that poem? They may not, because it looks like it could be a random quote. It may or may not be connected, and in fact, that's what I'm telling you. The poem is not necessarily connected to the chapter, but eventually the poems are all connected to something in the book. And I had a lot of fun writing them. I wrote them, as I said, all at one go towards the end, and I hadn't really planned the ending of the book, because that's not how I write. I tend to start a book. I have a general idea of the arc, in the sense of I generally know at the beginning whether the characters are going to survive to the end. But I don't really know the middle. I get a sense of what is going to happen as I go along, and as the characters change with the events in the story, I allow them to some extent, decide their fate. But it's not written, it is not, in my mind, fixed in advance. And these poems came out because I thought of an idea that required the poems to be written. So then they got written.
Yeah, fantastic. I think you know, there are some doggerels or whatever you want to call them. And I think I would like to mention this. In the fourth chapter, again I've randomly opened it. You start with, the fighting chance came from France, broke a leg and couldn't dance, right? Now, it's as simple as that. So it's like, it's running through the book, these kinds of things. And just now before we came here, she presented me with this animal alphabet. And I must tell you, all the illustrations and all the drawings that you see here are done by Manjula. So there is the visual, there is the poetic, and there is the prosaic or theatrical description that you find inside. So there are so many genres coming together in the book. And I was wondering when I was looking at this just now, I haven't studied it, but here also you see these. Graceful viper may look friendly, but his bite is always deadly, right? So it's a certain kind of humor that is titillating in one sense, you know. And then you want to read the rest of the chapter. Does it have any connection? And I believe it gives a certain kind of a trigger to the imagination of the reader. And you actually start drawing parallels. Even if the author is saying that I didn't know what was going to come in the chapter or they are disconnected. But honestly, after I started reading them, I thought, yes, it connects with that. I mean, the poetic part, actually the nonsensical part, becomes very sensible with the elaboration that you have in the chapter of the same position, as it were. So it's very interesting, this entire form that you see here. It is intra-genre. It's the new thing that I would like to coin here, you know, moving from one form to the other. So thank you for doing this. And see, every book that is meaningful, every book that is really creative, adds to the pool of creative literature, doesn't it? It's creative literature. So it adds to it in a very big way. So this book, that's why you might ask, why was this chosen, right?
Yes. What Sukrita's comment just now rose out of a conversation we were having 10 minutes ago, in which I suggested that we could talk about the reality of competitions and prizes and whether or not they augment the arts or are actually a problem within the arts. So I wondered whether Sukrita would like to talk about the process by which the jury came to it's not just this book, every year, what kinds of decisions go into choosing books. Because a great deal, a book is helped along by the attention that a prize brings. So any jury which chooses a book has to make a decision based not just on their personal opinions, but also what that book might do within a particular market or a particular audience.
I think Raghav Chandra was very clever when he chose very seasoned 3 people to be in the jury, right? And he was even cleverer and smarter when he decided that no one opinion would really be taken up as the final verdict. So there is obviously subjectivity, but subjectivity that is turned into objectivity because 3 minds are working on it. And individually, we actually shortlist some books. And then out of the shortlist, the common name, if there is any one common name in all the 3 lists, that gets it, the prize. And it's not just that. There is also a discussion that, makes you think about why the prize is going to such and such person. Because there's sometimes what has happened I think it was 2 years ago, when there were 2 names that had come up. So what do you do then? So a lot of discussion happens. There is, as you know, no objective criteria for what is really aesthetically satisfying and the best in literature. So it has to come out through a certain kind of logical discussion of what aesthetics is according to each one. And I think in as far as this particular book is concerned, as I said, to me, why I put it on the list was because I did feel that there were so many genres. One. Two, that there was a lot of readability, it wasn't a book that sort of made you think too much initially. You just went along with it very quickly. It's so readable. It's so readable. And yet, which is not to say that it doesn't call for contemplation. You needed to think about it. Now, I want to know from you, see the book, first of all, Taxi, the title, right? It's very intriguing. Why taxi? Why a female driver of the taxi? I think I would like to, is it autobiographical? Is it a fantasy that you had? I read somewhere that you don't even drive. So if you don't even drive, then is it because you wish you could drive? So you create a character who can drive, not only yourself, but drive other people also, So what motivated you into doing this?
The book started life as 2 chapters that I wrote about 15 years ago, in which exactly that, it occurred to me because, as you just said, I don't drive, and have all my life. I'm 71 years old and have always been driven by my friends, my sister, my niece, my other sister, and many drivers and many taxi drivers. So in a sense, if you don't drive, you are tremendously indebted to those who do drive. And if, like in my case, you use the same drivers, the same taxi drivers, which I do in Delhi, in a sense, I trust them with my life every day, practically. And I can think my own thoughts. I can't read in a car, but I can plan things. I can hold conversations. I can do other things in the 1.5 hours that it might take to get from my home to the airport, or just from Khan Market to where I live. It takes at least half an hour. And the fact of a driver gives me that freedom. And while thinking while thinking about my dependence on cab drivers, which has been my whole life, it was just one of those little reversals. I just wondered what would it be like to have a lady cab driver, because of course there are women taxi drivers both in Delhi and in Bombay. I think I've seen taxi drivers. But I wanted a taxi driver, a woman taxi driver, who was not part of a union, was not a taxi driver because she needed the job, but because she wanted to do that other kind of conveyance where you offer the experience of being in a little car, in a little cabin, being taken from any point to any other point, in the company of someone you trust, someone you're comfortable with. And it is very rare that is a woman. It is nearly always, many of us women are used to having male drivers. It is a rare case that we are dependent on a woman for that task. Except if it's our friends or our relatives. But in the way of a stranger, it's rare. At least in India, it's rare. And I wanted to try out that idea, but I couldn't. As I said, I started writing it 15 years ago. I had two chapters, and they just didn't go anywhere. And I don't force my narrative. If it doesn't flow, I won't continue writing. I wait for the narrative to start. And maybe 2 years ago, there was an incident Um, in the, I mean, the incident took the form of the death of a friend, and I can't say exactly why, but that just punched open a space in my mind, and everything flew out. It flowed into that hole and out into this whole story. And it began because this character, Maddie, she needed a place to stay. And the whole story winds around her being evicted from her home, finding an odd new home, and an odd proposition. And the proposition, when it is described that a man requests her to be a chauffeur, but dressed as a man, that sounds, it does sound a little twisted. In the book, it is not quite as twisted as it sounds, but of course it goes down a very peculiar path, because especially in Delhi, anyone here who knows Delhi well, I don't know what Bhopal is like, but Delhi is a very testosterone-driven city, and for a woman dressed as a man to be surrounded by other drivers who don't realize that this is a woman, it could result in very peculiar situations. And I found my mind, bending and twisting in interesting ways. And that is what leads me into a story that gives me personally enough interest to try it out, to work out.
Yeah, I noticed that in the book, Manjula. I don't know how conscious you are of what you were doing, but see, you are dealing with gender all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very prominent kind of it comes center stage again and again.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, lady driver, you start from that, because that's not conventional, right? Taxi driver. It's
Well,
not conventional.
both my sisters drive, both
No,
my nieces drive.
but
so
as
I'm-
a taxi.
Yes, but I'm very familiar, even if you are not a commercial driver, the way the world responds to women drivers is specific. It's different. I
Yeah.
remember many years ago, our other sister, she was at the wheel of her little Fiat and was backing out in a way that another driver thought was awkward. He did something bizarre. He got out of his car, he put his hand on her steering wheel and turned it for her. And we both thought that's almost an assault. Almost. He meant it to be helpful. He thought that she wasn't able to back out of the situation. But it was so without any, no please, no thank you, or may I help you? No. It was awkward because there was no social situation to handle that particular set of circumstances. So many different experiences have gone into creating the character of this driver.
Yeah, that's very obvious, because she's, in a way, it's very simple, but it's very complex. The whole thing is very complex because the kind of cross-dressing she's supposed to be doing, and it's demanded out of her, and she agrees to do it. She sort of even works out strategies as to how to appear a man and dressed up in a man's dress. Not just that, there are honestly too many references where gender is evoked. For instance, you are also talking about how most men drivers they regard their cars to be female. So, it's in female gender that they would refer to the car. While in her case, she was referring to it as a man. Car as a man.
One
So-
of my sisters does that.
Okay. So, but the point I'm making is that it seems to acquire some kind of a larger metaphorical meaning, So the story is layered. It's very layered, though it runs very fast. But you go on discovering greater layers as you are reading the novel. And I think that is its signature in a way. Because the moment you start taking the story for granted, it moves into another tough situation, you know. And you wonder why. For instance, you know, when the two drivers get to each other, I mean, not get to each other as such, but they have a moment together. Now, he doesn't know that it's a female driver, but he treats her, and are they gay or what happens? But they have a moment, you know. So, I mean, she goes out of the way to create that relationship also. So it's far more complex than saying, okay, there is a male, this is a female driver. And I wondered why you may have done that.
Why I did that?
Why would you create that situation?
I can't answer the why, except to say that my mother would constantly ask me why I had to write stories that her friends couldn't read. I think one way of answering the why, it's not direct, is to say that another point that we shared while we were talking outside the session was to realize that both Sukrita and I have had a childhood away from India.
I was going to talk about that, but yeah, I'm glad you're bringing it up.
For me, returning to India as a teenager was a major culture shock. And one of the first features of that culture shock was, until we returned to India, my parents were not terribly concerned how I dressed and what I did with my hair. But the moment we were back in India, it suddenly became, it's not because of the society around us so much as the larger family became concerned. I mean, became a concern for my parents in the sense of, what will they think if you just look whichever way you like? You have to conform to something that we can all live with, and that you can do whatever you like when you're far away, but while you're with us, you need to conform to something. And every teenager knows that desire to just be different, to be yourself, to, if I want to cut my hair, why can't I cut my hair? And as an older person, I understand why. But as a young person, it's my hair. I have grown the hair. The parent can say, but I feed you, so the hair grows because of me. I mean, there are these kinds of arguments that can go on, you know. And in the midst of all of this, I would say a crucial and a fundamental point of difficulty was to fit in with the gender politics of being a particular kind of Indian. It's not just any Indian. You belong to a middle-class society, a respectable middle-class society. You are expected to conform in certain ways, not just for today, but for your whole life ahead, because your parents or your family or your all your cousins and aunts and uncles, at some level are thinking of which you are not thinking about. They are thinking about your life ahead. You are only thinking about today's haircut, but they are thinking of the life that lies ahead. And as an older person, I can see the nature of that concern. But for me, it was very painful, very difficult, and very much a series of confrontations at a kind of subliminal level. And one of the issues was the issue of gender. Where do you fit within the gender? If you don't want, I never had any interest in marriage. So then, this is not just as an Indian, as a South Asian, as an Asian, if you're not interested in marriage, what are you? And my sister's little daughter, when she was 6 years old, she asked me 3 questions in rapid succession. And they stayed with me a long time. She was just a tiny thing. And she would see all her uncles, her other aunts were dressed in saris or at least salwars or those kinds of clothes. I was wearing jeans the whole time, always. And she asked me one day, she was all very cute, and she said, Manji, auntie, are you a girl or a boy? So um, I said, what do you think? And she said, very coy, she said, I think you're a boy. Okay. So I said, I'm not. Then she said, she thought, I could see the wheels turning. She said, Manju, auntie, are you a mummy? And I said, no, I'm not a mummy. And she said, why? And I said, because I don't have children, so I can't be a mummy. And after further thought, this was the important point. She said, Manju, auntie, if you're not a mummy and you're not a boy, what are you? And it really touched me. It left me with I mean, we might have laughed or we made a little joke, but it left a really deep impression. And in some ways, that question is what remains with me. What is one if one
So-
is not one of the...
Yeah, so I think it's that probably behind the idea of you're constantly breaking stereotypes. You know, this role playing that one has to do. And I think that is why even this relationship between the two drivers, it becomes a relationship eventually. That moment is converted into a relationship. Now, would one call that a gay relationship? Would one say, because the other guy doesn't know that she's a woman, you know. So it goes on, the intrigue is intricate. The intrigue is very, very complicated. So I begin to wonder, you have a complex plot here. Also, when you call taxi, what is taxi a fantasy somewhere that, because you are oscillating between two continents all the time. And there isn't a very clear kind of a notion of home as such. Are you home there? Normally, the stereotype is when people say, oh, where are you settled? Can you answer this question? What does that mean? Where are you settled? So you think, okay, am I settled in India or am I settled in the US? Or, which I have a problem, existential problem. A lot of my poetry comes out of that. So I wonder, taxi, the whole novel has come up probably because you are all the time, you know, in a taxi. Your life's journey is like that. You have temporary destinations. Today you are going to Panchsheel and tomorrow you might go from there to Khan Market or wherever. So your soul is not, or is it settled, as you said, in an unsettled state? You know, the sense of belonging that we talk about, conventional literature students are always talking about, where is the sense of belonging, right? Today we are saying, we don't belong anywhere, and that is our sense of belonging.
Right.
That you belong nowhere. So many people feel that today, right? Where is the home?
Yes, I would say that when I read, I mean, one reads now and then the anguished essays and articles and books of people longing for a homeland that they've been thrown out of. Typically, if they've been forced to leave a home or homeland, there's a longing for that. People like myself who grew up without a fixed original home, because we traveled when I was a child, and I mean, one could say, but that was in your childhood, why haven't you settled into some place since then? Well, for some of us, it happens naturally. You want a fixed homeland, you find it, and you settle there. Well, some of us, people like myself, the constant traveling leads to an erosion of the need or the desire for roots. I don't have that. So I mean, another favorite talking point for, I mean, in real life, no, not just in the book, people will say, but what food do you like? Now, I like a range of foods. I'm not fixated on food. It is a conversation we have all the time. I don't hanker for any particular food. Um, I, I eat a range of things, and I don't feel the need that I have seen in so many friends, so many family members who feel that they haven't eaten if they haven't eaten a particular kind of familiar, beloved food. I don't have that. And whether is that a good thing or bad thing, I'm not saying that that's a good thing. But it makes me a very easy guest. People
Yeah.
are always feeding me because I'm easy to feed.
So Manjula has a very, this is the kind of humor that she has. And would you call it dark humor? I don't know. Would you call it a cheerful thing that, but that's what she is doing all the time with these doggerels that she's using. Because she's injecting the novel with the element of ludicrous. It's constantly there. It's ludicrous. And yet you're taking it so seriously. That's the beauty of it. And if you don't read one doggerel, you will not read any, because you have a habit of going to a novel and you say chapter meaning, this is prose, then you continue with the next. You want to follow the storyline, right? So you just do that quickly and miss out on. So because you were saying you are not sure whether people are reading it. But once you read it, then you hang on to it because you enjoy it. The ludicrous is always very, like you have a stand-up comedy or things like that. It's very enjoyable. So like people like Shakespeare had created fools, the fool who would speak the ludicrous. And it would give sense to a lot of otherwise nonsensical stories that go on in life. So I don't know what it is, but you happen to create that magic of narration, which is the juxtaposition. I'm a teacher, right? Now you see how there is a balancing of the tragic, because there are very many tragic elements in the novel. How that gets balanced out with the absurd. It's absolutely absurd, and it's sometimes tongue-in-cheek, but it's never very bitter. It's not bitter. So, probably, could one say it has the reflection of your personality?
I I have a feeling that I can't answer that. But
Okay, that's fine.
but I will say that there was a particular moment when I forget, maybe when I was in my very early 20s. I was doing an MA. I did an MA in history. Have I mentioned that I was a terrible student? I was not a good student, but my parents wanted me to finish. I did a BA, and then I wanted to run away from that whole way of life. My parents wanted me to do an MA, and I said, okay, fine, I'll do an MA, and then that's it. I did my MA in the worst possible way. I confess that I did the exams, but I never checked my results. So even though I say I did an MA, I have no idea whether or not I actually earned the MA. Anyway, at that time I lived in a hostel in Baikala in Bombay, and that was outside my my familiar social range. And I was uncomfortable because I was not in a social milieu that I understood easily. I don't speak Hindi. Of course, I don't speak Marathi either. I only speak English. I don't speak Malayalam. People think I'm Tamilian. I'm not Tamilian. And if you don't speak one of the Indian languages other than English, then you become an alien in a certain way. And I at that time in that hostel, when I was beginning to sense, oh, I'm not comfortable, I'm not happy here, but I had to be there. It was where I needed to be for that particular moment. I did this consciously. I began to make fun of myself as a way of drawing attention away from the things that made me different. By making myself a target of humor, but by doing the humor myself, I was gaining some power over the situation. And it was a technique. And
Yeah,
I
was
think
just noticing this, you know, every alphabet in animal here, just see, beautifully illustrated. It is a character. Every alphabet is a character. So you have the language of the visual, you have the language of humor and irony, and you have the language for theater. So I think all in all the elements there in the novel are in a way, in a larger sense, a kind of a, I won't say autobiography, but self-reflexive writing. Because you're
That's
using
nice.
all these elements.
that's well said by an educator.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I've
you.
been getting signals from
Yes.
there.
Let's
Thank you so
let's take this session to the floor, and if we have questions from the audience, we are welcoming the questions. If you have any questions from the speakers, anybody from the audience, ma'am, no questions?
Not a question, just a remark.
Yeah.
The nonsense verse which ma'am was reading out, I was, being a Bengali, I was reminded of Shukumar Ray. So they were so meaningful and so intense, although written in a very gibberish manner. So I'll read it. Definitely the curiosity has been raised. Congratulations, ma'am.
Can we have a big round? You, ma'am, has one question. Yes, yes. Acha, okay, ma'am, we'll come on to you second. Let's have that. Yes.
Ma'am, what do you think makes a writer writer? I know it's a broad one,
Yes,
but
it is a very broad question.
Network.
Yeah? Is it okay? Okay, so I would say the desire, the really important thing is to have something worth saying.
okay.
It's not the physical ability to write, it's not owning a computer, it's having something worth saying.
Yes, ma'am.
That's
I
it.
got a point.
Deepa, ma'am, would like to question. She's got a question. Please pass her the mic. No? I see. Ma'am, the mic not on.
So I didn't catch the initial part of it because I came in a bit late. But you know what's very interesting, just to comment, is that my children who had a sort of an upbringing where they moved all the time, they seek identity. But I love what you say, that this travels made you not want an identity in a way, right? Not seek an identity.
Eroded the roots.
Eroded the roots. I know, but they keep seeking. That's the whole thing. But I think this is a story I'd like to tell them.
Well, it's what I've noticed that you get, there are, of course, there are many variations in between, but by and large, there are those who didn't have roots and who seek them, and those who may have had roots but I have lost an interest in being rooted. I'm quite happy. I am happy pretty much anywhere. And I think of that as an asset. It may not be.
No, I think it's definitely an asset. Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking.
So,
If I could just add
yes,
on to
sure,
this, I
sure,
think
sure, ma'am.
I am in a similar situation. And I have always said that, and I think I'm saying it also again because I also want to convince myself that that is the truth, which is that, when I'm with myself, just myself, is when I'm writing my poetry. And I think somewhere my writing becomes my home. And it might seem as an exaggeration or something, but that's why I keep having appointments with myself. Doesn't matter where I go, I actually run away from my so-called home to go stay anywhere, to have an appointment with myself so that I can dig out those, or rather have the rooting there within myself. So I think there are various strategies of coping that state, and you work out your own way of doing it, a sense of engagement with something.
Right there, she's, the way you create home, getting out of your home is something very creative that most of the poets must be doing. We move on to the quiz session now. The one who gets the right answer would get a book by Dale Carnegie. But the condition here is you got to raise your hand and answer the question. The question is, which literary award is considered to be the highest honor for Indian writers? Anybody from the audience? Yes, please.
Is it Gyanpith Award?
Yes, absolutely right. Please come onto the stage. Can we have a big round of applause? The answer is Gyanpith Award. Yes. Ma'am, we'd have a quick photo op.
You need my introduction.
Yes, please identify yourself.
And I'm a research scholar.
I see. Thank you, Divyani. Congratulations. The quiz winner will take home the inspiring book, Living an Enriched Life by Dale Carnegie, a timeless guide to bounding self-confidence, setting goals, and cultivating a positive attitude for a more fulfilling life. We move on to the memento giving. As we conclude this truly poetic, insightful session, I would like to request Naeem Mansoori, a co-founding member of the society, to please present our esteemed speakers with a memento as a token of our gratitude. Can we have a big round of applause for Naeem Mansoori ji? Padma Shri Bhil artist Bori Bai has created this artwork for Bhopal Literature Festival 2025, depicting the connection between nature, earth, the human being and the environment, and the secularity inherent and imperative to our existence. To our incredible speakers, thank you for sharing your wisdom, creativity and insight.